Welcome everybody, welcome this afternoon. We are doing a webinar this afternoon with CALPA, our friends of the California League of Park Associations, and I'm Paige Rogowski. I'm here in my office here in headquarters in Sacramento, and in a moment we will meet our panelists and let you know where they're coming from. But today we're going to talk a little bit about how to do annual planning as partners. So glad you guys are here. Thanks for coming. Glad you made it in and navigated the technology too. Just wanted to talk through a little bit of the objectives and reasons for our call, or our webinar, I should say. We are requiring written annual plans of our cooperating associations. So this is something we'll be rolling out over the next year or so, and we want to get a head start on this and wanted to bring you together with a few folks who have been doing it together as partners for a while and give them a chance to share their stories and experiences and hopefully learn something new. So before we dive into the content, let's talk a little bit about some housekeeping. This is a Zoom technology, and you've probably noticed some of the platforms, pretty easy to use. But on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little icon for chat. If you would take a second, open that chat box, and you'll see that the chat has, on the very bottom of the chat box, it says type message here, and right above it is a little to field. And if you select the all panelists and attendees, that way, if you want to talk to everybody who's here on the webinar, you can have a chance to say hi and introduce yourself. So let's practice that for a minute. Select all panelists and attendees, and then type a message, who you are and where you're coming from. Hi, everybody. Oh, Henrico, great. Hi, Dan. I don't think we've met yet. Super Calveras, very nice. Great, great. I always hear from LA. Henry from Anderson Marsh, excellent. Mary Ellen, Wolfman, wonderful. Hey, Jenny's here too, wonderful. Glad to have you guys here. Thank you so much. That's how the chat function works. Good practicing on that. And throughout the webinar, if you have some questions you want to pose to any of the panelists, you can actually select one of us at a time and write your question, or you can pose your question to the entire group. I will say we'll have some time at the end of our session where we'll take some questions and answers from you as well. So if you have some note paper, you just want to jot your question down, we can catch it at the end as well. And as you know how these things go, if you have the question, well, chances are other people have it too. So don't be shy about asking questions too. One of the cool things about doing annual planning is there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's kind of a personal preference thing, an organizational culture thing. And it kind of works in partnership too with the personalities that you work with. So you'll get a sense for some of that, and hopefully we're going to demonstrate for you just how flexible this process can be. Let's see, I just want to mention too that we are recording this webinar. There's some folks that are not able to attend, so the plan is to record it and make it available to other CALPA members as well as needed. And the other thing to mention too is just a little bit of forgiveness. We're working in parks, and some of our parks, as you know, are pretty remote and have some slow connections at times. I know from my experience in Anza Borrego, it was always an adventure. So just bear with us if you hit some static or anything. So again, thanks so much. I'm glad to have you guys here. We're going to do a little round robin and introduce each other as panelists and talk to you a little bit about our backgrounds. I'll start. I'm going to be your facilitator today. You're going to learn from some of our expert cooperating association leaders. But a little bit about my background too, for those who might not know. I am the former executive director of Anza Borrego Foundation. So I do have experience on the cooperating association side of things as well. But I also today wanted to bring to you the experience of kind of stepping into the shoes of our CALs, our cooperating association liaisons, because you know, as you know, they're charged with really I don't know, keeping everything in line according to the contract, right? That's part of their duties. They're also in charge with things like getting the approvals that are necessary for projects, and but they have a whole host of other things that they need to do that have nothing to do with being a cooperating association. So as you guys probably know well, they're very, very busy. But they also need to be informed as to what's going on. So I'm going to start off by saying I'm going to give you a little story based on a true story, although this is fictional. But let's say that there is the most wonderful cooperating association in the world, and they're supporting a historic property. And these wonderful cooperating association volunteers decide, and they're also state park volunteers, they're VIPs as well, and they have given their heart and soul to the park, and they notice that, gosh, that barn, it really, really needs a new fresh coat of paint. I know it's a historic barn, so we want to make sure that it really keeps in with the theme. So, but you know what, let's talk as a board, and let's see if we can't fund the painting of the new barn, right? And just make it really good. So picture this board comes together, they vote and say, absolutely, let's paint that barn. And then sure enough, they go out and produce all these brochures and say, we are the best association ever, and we're going to paint this barn, help us restore this barn. And all of a sudden those brochures are showing up on visitor center counters, and they're starting to talk with visitors and raising funds. And can you picture yourself for a second as a Cal walking into this situation and saying, wait a second, hold on a second, we're gonna repaint a barn? Like, who approved this project? How did this happen? So we're trying to avoid a situation like that where there's a lot of time, energy, and resources put towards projects that are not necessarily going to be approved, or they're not the highest priority for parks. So just wanted to paint that picture for you from the perspective of state parks. And with that being said, why don't we go round robin around? We'll start with Anna. Let's go alphabetically. So Anna Patterson is Executive Director of the Lobos Foundation. Anna, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I seem to be having a few computer glitches right now, so I apologize if you lose me. I don't think you will, but just in case. The timing's perfect. So I am the Executive Director at the Point Lobos Foundation. We're located in Carmel. We have a park reserve that is really visited, very popular. Our organization operates at about $1 million a year. We occasionally work with partner parks in the Carmel area, but not very frequently at this point. And we have 6 full-time staff. One of those is on a contract basis, so working on our cultural archive right now. And then Point Lobos is a little unique in that there's also a really robust docent organization. We have 2, or I shouldn't say we, State Parks has a docent organization that involves 250 docents right now that's been around since 1981. And our board bylaws, our organizational bylaws call for half of our board to be made up of volunteers in parks. And so we work really closely not only with our nonprofit or with our state park partners, we also work with the docent organization as an extension of those state park partners. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Anna. Very cool. Next in line, alphabetically, is Heidi Doyle from Sierra State Parks Foundation.
Here we go. Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Heidi Doyle. I'm the Executive Director of the Sierra State Parks Foundation. I bring a unique perspective because I did work for California State Parks for 32 years. And at one point in my career, I was a Cal for the organization in which I now lead. The Sierra State Parks Foundation is the cooperating association for 7 California state parks in Lake Tahoe and Donner. So we have a lot of different parks that we partner with. We also have a memorandum of understanding for us to operate 2 historic sites and the adjacent visitor centers. We have 4 full-time employees. During the summer when we're operating park operations, that brings us up to 28 altogether. Our annual budget's about $1.2 million. In 2018, we returned over $800,000 back to our park partners. We have a board of directors of 8. And I think a great relationship with state parks right now.
Excellent. Thanks, Heidi. Well, and last is Michelle Luna from Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am the Executive Director of Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods, and I'm proud to say I've been doing this job for 25 years this year. And we have currently a staff of 8 to 10 of us, depending on the time of year. The parks that we support are Armstrong Redwood State Natural Reserve, which was an old growth redwood forest, Austin Creek State Recreation Area, which is some redwoods, but oak woodlands, a transitional ecosystem from the old growth redwoods into the backcountry of Austin Creek, which is about 6,000 acres. Those two parks are contiguous to one another. And then Sonoma Coast State Park, which goes from Jenner all the way down to Bodega Bay. We are in the Sonoma-Mendocino Coast District, and we are in the Russian River sector of that district. We support about 20 different education and stewardship programs, including a number of citizen science programs where we're collecting data for different agencies. We are also uniquely one of the state park operators, in addition to being a co-op. And we stepped up into this role in 2012 when Austin Creek was slated to close, and we were able to keep it open. So now, since then, we have operated the campground and done maintenance up in Austin Creek. But there's one entrance to both parks, Armstrong and Austin Creek. So we also staff the entrance station and collect the fees for both parks. We are currently working on a new co-management agreement for both parks, in which we will continue to handle visitor services in both Armstrong and Austin Creek. We'll do the maintenance in Austin Creek and campground operations. And then we will also, because of our co-management, we will partner on a number of projects in both parks. We have 2 visitor centers, one in Armstrong and one out on the coast in Jenner, and we also have a downtown retail store. We also uniquely manage the State Park Volunteer and Parks program in the state parks that we support.
Excellent. Thanks, Michelle. Well, what you can see here, you've got 3 nonprofit leaders from 3 different areas throughout the state, 3 different districts as well. So they work with different staff who have different preferences. There's even different district leadership too, which, as we know, can vary throughout the state. So you've got some great perspective here. These folks are also paid staff. So we recognize that a majority of our cooperating associations are all volunteer led. So one of the themes we did want to get across today is some of the principles that they'll be talking about. They're scalable. You can do it regardless of the size of your organization or management level as well. So works out pretty well. With that being said, I mentioned, of course, our perspective from state parks, and I just want to say thanks again for that too. I think this is something that we do as we plan as partners, because that hopefully helps us avoid unnecessary expenses and energy as well, let's be honest. So I wanted to ask the panelists, what do you see as the benefits of doing the planning together as partners? And why don't we go back to alphabetical order and start with you, Anna?
Yeah, one of the things, and I just want to say this with the caveat that we got when we started planning, we didn't have sessions like this. The partnerships office wasn't here, so we found we kind of worked our way into it through need and trial and error and things like that. But one of the biggest benefits that we see on an ongoing basis is not only in the plan that's developed that memorializes what you want to do with your partners, but in the process itself and getting to the plan and working with your partners closely enough to understand their priorities and match and where you overlap in priorities. So one of the benefits for that we see is really in the engagement of developing a plan and just talking. What is it that you most want to do this year and most want to accomplish, and how do we support that? And then, of course, to have something documented is really helpful for everyone who's involved.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anna. Heidi?
I would like to add, having this planning document is also great as an education tool up and down your staff at your foundation, but also up and down your volunteer staff as well as state park staff. So everybody from the park aides to the superintendent, we're all on the same page of what the organizations are doing. why we're trying to raise money, and what our accomplishments are going to be. So this blueprint really is a great communication tool for all the people that we intersect with.
Here, I think that's especially important as we're looking at the staff changing, and potentially our CALs may be changing too. Some of you on the webinar may be experiencing that too. So this is a way that you'll have something in writing to be able to share and orient what the partnership is like, and literally what's going to happen in the next 12 months too. Michelle, you have something to add too?
Yeah, I can just share really quickly my screen very quickly here. Are you seeing it? Oh, no, sorry. All right. Do you see my screen now? Oops. Maybe you don't.
It's looking good.
I see it, Michelle, yeah.
The strategic plan. Are you seeing? Okay. Well, what I was going to say is that Stewards has been doing strategic planning in partnership with state parks for a lot of years, and we just completed our most recent strategic plan, and it's going to go until December 2021. So this is just an executive summary, but I'm going to just show you this. These are just kind of the key areas right in here that we are focusing on. And within the strategic plan, there are 3-year goals with timelines, and then there are also 1-year goals. So when we talk about annual planning, we're going to be drawing on our annual goals to guide a lot of what we're going to do this year. And all of this was worked on with state parks. And so it's something that we've agreed on. And so anything that we're going to take on, we're going to consult our strategic plan and our annual goals to make sure they fit somewhere within that plan. And so this just makes it really useful for us in terms of being able to, get approvals for different things that we're going to do, and it makes things much more efficient for us as an organization and with state parks, so that we do know that state parks is in support of whatever we're proposing, and they will bring things to us that fit within our plan as well. So I hope that makes sense. And now I need to figure out how to not share.
Absolutely, that's a really great tool. Thanks, Michelle. Does anyone else have annual planning in conjunction with their strategic plan? Something that's just the 1-year snippet of the overall goals?
Paige?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so we do, like Stewards, we do a strategic plan and involve our partners at state parks in the development of the plan, and also in the approval of the plan before it's adopted by the board. And just echoing what Michelle said is once you've engaged your partners in developing an overarching plan, it's really easy and more efficient to move forward on the specific projects or programs that you're doing.
Perfect. Heidi? Oh, Heidi, unmute yourself.
There we go. Okay, sounds good. To do that, what's really wonderful about the ability of the partners to do strategic plans, and what really underlies the importance of it, is that we're in a position for long-term planning for what might happen in our parks. That's just not part of the DNA of government many times, is to vision. And then creating these long-term, usually between 4 and 6 year strategic plans. It's important for the organization to then return to it every year with your state park partner and pick out what's your annual plan going to be. And then from those initiatives, you come up, how am I going to pay for it? And that's where today's discussion is.
Hear, hear. How about unexpected challenges to it too? How would you address things that, if the plan is going off course, or something happened like the fires, for instance, or some sort of game changer?
Well, you bring up a really good point, because stuff happens. We are all in the natural environment, and I'm sure all of your organizations that are listening out there have thought about the what if plan. What if our park is closed down because of a fire, because of a flood, because of an infestation of some sort? And so plans are always should be considered living documents that are reviewed and looked at, especially when it comes to budgeting, because a great way for an organization is to fail is to make your annual budget on assumptions, and those assumptions fail or something goes wrong or the course changes due to the year and you haven't made assumptions.
Yeah, Michelle, what do you think about that too? I mean, how have you adapted as needed?
Well, certainly, as we said, things come up, and we have a perfect case in point right now in our park because even though we're in Guerneville, and even though we did not flood, the rainfall that we got and the storm events that we've experienced this year caused a lot of slides in our parks. So right now, we're having to do some adapting because there are some significant slides up in Austin Creek that are actually preventing us from keeping our campground open at the moment. But by working with state parks and having a good relationship with them, we were able to talk to them, and they brought in a geotechnical engineer yesterday. He looked at the site, he gave us some ideas, he made some recommendations, and now State Parks is going to be able to do a few little minor fixes so that we can open the road again and people can get to our campground. So because we have our annual operations plan, which is what we're required to have as a state park operator, and that's a plan that we update every single year, there are provisions in that plan which make it very clear to us and to state parks about who's responsible for what. And that's a really important piece, because if you have an emergency in your park and you're not really clear about who's responsible for what, then you're going to get to a place where it's going to be very confusing, and there could be some contention about who's supposed to be fixing what. So our operations plan is very clear about that. And so in this case, the road is state parks, and the road is something that state parks is responsible for. But our staff will step in, and if we need to put in barricades, we will, say we're available. We've got volunteers that can get together and put up these delineators so that people don't drive on the weak part of the road. So those are the ways that we work together really successfully.
Yeah, I will say it can be a big challenge, and I think you're right, Michelle, or anyone. If you have any tips for, when you do see an urgent need as a cooperating association and you're having trouble reaching your CAL, or your CAL's been, taking on some other tasks, or you never know how that happens. But what are some tips and tricks for preparing that conversation with your CAL in terms of identifying the priorities?
I think one way to have ongoing conversations is to have set meetings. So have an agreement that you and your CAL are going to meet the first Monday of every month at 10 o'clock. So because we all get really busy, and so by having that initial agreement that we're going to commit to this relationship, because it is a relationship, that always helps out. And then also go out there and get to know the different people that we need to work with in the park units. So it's not going around the CAL, but sometimes going directly to the maintenance chief and asking those questions to see what can we do to help out, because these are agreed upon projects, and be out there and facilitate the communication. So I think having these set meetings outside your board meetings, have that set all the time, and then getting out into the parks and getting to know those park staff that you interact with will really help with that communication process.
And in your case, as an executive director, I mean, you have full-time availability, so to speak. I know you're not really full-time, and you don't have full-time to deal with CAL relations, but you do have the ability to, the time to put forward this. And for all volunteer associations, it can probably be overwhelming for a CAL to get hit from, let's say you had 8 board members, right? 8 different perspectives on what they think is priority. So how do you manage working through your board, through one person, whether that be an executive director or a president?
Me?
Yeah, you can take that one, Heidi.
Okay, I was going to say, I wasn't sure who you were talking to. I think part of it is to kind of, if you will, quote, chain of command. So just remind the board that the CALs have a huge responsibility way outside even our organization, and to please have that discussion with me. But also when our volunteers are out in the park, our board members are out in the park, and they're going to run into people. So to make sure that the discussion or what we're pushing is something that's already been agreed upon, and not to come sideways into a new discussion.
Makes sense. What do you guys think, Anna and Michelle? Anything to add? Any things that have really worked well for you as you work through your CAL?
We're fortunate enough that we have an office over at our district offices. We have our own separate space, but we have an office at district, and I have made it a habit to spend at least a half of a day there every week, just so I can communicate. And I know that's not always possible based on people's locations and accessibility and things like that. But when I started here about 7 years ago, our relationship with our partners at state parks was not very good, and the turning point for us really was getting that shared space and talking more and understanding more, and really, like Heidi said, sharing with the board that a CAL's job, I'm sure everybody listening knows and sees how much people have to do at state parks and how little they have to actually do it with. So helping to getting to know our partners well has really helped us to share expectations that are more realistic with our board and with volunteers, and that really honor people's roles in a different way when we didn't have that relationship. So I agree with Heidi and Michelle. When I first started, I remember her saying you need monthly check-ins. When you're doing a project with parks, you need monthly check-ins, and it's really important.
I agree. Thanks so much. Michelle, anything to add?
Not really. I mean, I definitely have regular meetings with different park staff, not necessarily the CAL all the time. Sometimes my conversations are directly with the district superintendent, sometimes with the sector superintendent, and we even have a standing monthly call about our cultural site, Palm Farm Pottery, and that's a call that I coordinate once a month with Sacramento staff. Who are, giving input to how we're managing that cultural site. So there's lots of ways to communicate, and definitely scheduling regularly, it makes it really a lot more successful, because then you're staying on top of things and things just don't get pushed off to the side.
Makes sense. Thanks. Perfect. Well, how about we just dive straight to the question at heart and just get to what is the process like for the three of you, for your organizations and your partners? Heidi, you want to give us a start?
Okay, so I actually have, let me see, some things I'd like to share with everybody. Oops, let me see if I can reduce this so I can read it. So I have 5 slides I want to share with everybody. And I'm going to see, since it's Pi Day, how we can slice this up to make sense. I hear the all the compliments. So when deciding to take something on, it's real important, just like Anna and Michelle said, to really go against, look at it as a litmus test with your strategic plan and other plans, and find out, are your projects, is your project that you're looking at mission-based? Review your own organizational mission statement. Does it meet your needs as the partner? Look at the mission of state parks. Is the project that you're looking at part of the mission of state parks? And review your strategic and your annual plans. And then I add the word capacity. Does your organization have the capacity to paint that red barn? And maybe they do, or maybe it's something you need to look at during the next year. Oops, return. Oops, how do I do return? There we go. Some things I wanted to bring up real quick is, in the communication, is figuring out what is DPR speak for ideas. Because you need to decide, are you looking at a long-term project, which would be a capital outlay, Those are projects that take multiple years, 2 to 3 years, and it's anything that changes the function of the facility. So it's taking that red barn and turning it into a visitor center, for an example. Is it something that's a deferred maintenance project that can be accomplished in 1 to 2 years? Are you repairing something to a structure that's already in the inventory, and those repairs have already been identified on the project identification database, the PID list? Or is it other construction that is going to take place? Is it something that's going to be an ADA upgrade, or is it going to be an improvement, or is it going to be brand new construction? So it's really important as you're speaking with our state park partners that we're all speaking the same language as we move forward. This is our budget planning process. And I want to emphasize that as I'm talking about the process that we go through in creating a budget of what we're going to spend for state parks, for us, it doesn't include predefined park operations. So since we do have a memorandum of understanding to run the historic house tours, we collect fees, and those fees go back into supporting that program. And we pay for Sierra State Parks Foundation staff to do that park work. This is not part of this particular budget planning process. We're talking about money that will go either directly into a contingent fund to pay for state park staffing or to pay for a mutually agreed project. So first of all, we ask for project requests from state park staffs, and we ask for them to come around the beginning of each November. Our budget cycle we're on an annual budget cycle, so I have to present our annual budget in December. So we need to know, what do state park staff, what are their requests going to be? Then we also go, the board, our board always has ideas. Our volunteers always have ideas, so we capture those. And then I also want to make sure that we're looking into the planning documents for our facility. So for example, we have historic structures reports to make sure that we're still staying on target and in priority for what those historic structure reports identified. Then we identify, number 2, we identify spending categories and the resource availability. So we do that around mid-November. So is the project that we're talking about a capital project that's going to be multiple year? Are we going to be looking at Are we going to be looking at a fundraising campaign for that? Is it already agreed by state parks? So is it on the PID list? And so we want to make sure all of those things are together. And lastly, for these larger projects, do you want or need a project agreement that memorializes on both sides through the partner and as well as state parks that this is a project we want to continue? And that's especially important in this era of staff turnover. District superintendents it seems like it's about maximum 4 years right now. So, and there's projects that we all are fundraising for and have in the pipeline that's has a longer timeline than that. And of course, excuse me for my spelling, but is it an annual expense? So what we do is we ask for annual expense requests for state parks. Is it for personnel, interpretive support, non-capital spending? And I'm going to show you on the next slide how we request for that money. And then at the end of November, when we're putting together our final budget review, we have to decide how much can we grant to state parks. We have a finance committee. At the minimum, that's going to be your treasurer. That's going to tell your board how much is going to be available out of your unrestricted money to give back to parks the next year. Myself, the executive director, your board president, is going to meet with the CAL to review the state park requests that come in, and the two of you jointly will come up with spending recommendations with that pot of money that you have available. And then either your board president or the executive director will present the joint recommendations as presented to the board for final review and approval in December. And I'm not sure how to ask if there's any questions at this point. So I will continue. This right here is a sample of the form we use for state parks when they want to request money for us. This one happens to come from Donner Memorial State Park. The budget amount requested ended up on the back of the sheet, but they were looking to add $300 for library books. And so this is a sample of our budget request form. Depending on the complexity of the project, they're a lot more detailed, but these for our simple requests from state parks for volunteer support, for library books, also for staffing requests. For example, we do pay for a state park interpreter PI during the summer months. And for that request, we actually treat it as a grant, and we want deliverables listed on the request detail. Then we take all of the requests together and I put it on one spreadsheet. And this is what I present. This is what the Cal and I work together on. So you can see all of the requests are put on there, even ones that we're not going to fund or we decide later on to fund, because I want to memorialize this process. So this is what we are presented, and Matt Green is our Cal and myself, and we had a 2-hour discussion with each request one at a time to find out, is this an appropriate funding request? And the first one is real. It's a real good idea of sugar pine rodent exclusion. And our Cal didn't feel that was a role of our foundation to hire an exterminator, so that was denied. But also I want to point out with our process, you can see that we have the amount requested, the amount approved, and then we also divide it. Is it going to be coming out of that unrestricted funding, or is it going to be coming out of a restricted account that we've raised money for? Then what we do is we put this all together. This is our sheet that we use as our annual planning tool. So I've taken now the state park requests for this particular year, and I dump them into our long-term project planning as well. So this is park by park for all 7 parks of things that we have been requested, or ideas that people agree, that we agree collectively it's good to do, and many times are things that are not going to get done for several years, but we don't want to lose the idea that it was agreed upon, it was a good idea in the first place. So you can see for Sugar Pine Point State Park, number 1 was historic building assessment. It was an estimated $60,000. This is an interesting one. We've actually budgeted for it out of a restricted account, and we're waiting for state parks to get this done. So that's part of this discussion, because we all know of the frustration of agreeing to a project, funding a project, and then waiting for the bid to go out. The next one is that I wanted to share with you. This is what I give as the executive director, the board president can give. And this is what I put together every month when I meet with our Cal. And this is what I present to the board, kind of an update of what's going on. So, because I want to make sure that we're always remembering what we agreed to. And also, you never know when some grant request is going to come through that will make funding available to you. So, and one thing that this schedule adds to is the whole idea of PEF. So now I'm starting to track on this one a monthly basis where we are within the state park system of once the money is raised, actually getting this done, because many of us know most of our projects will involve a PEF at one point. And that's all I have.
Heidi, can you just quickly define PEF and just a brief overview of that process?
Yes, I'm going to try to stop share. There we go. So PEF is a project evaluation form, and that is an internal document used at the district level that goes through all the core staff to make sure that a project that's going to happen is actually meet the needs of all the different components. Good example is your Red Barn example. So if a volunteer wants to, if that's a project, then that's going to be put on a piece of paper and it's going to be passed around to the cultural heritage folks. Do you think, what color should that be? What paint should we do? It's going to be approved by the maintenance staff. Who's going to do the work? What safety requirements? It's going to go to the admin staff. Is it going to be bid out? Who's going to pay for the paint and all of that? So it goes through all these approval processes to make sure the Red Barn is painted correctly, and not in the case at Sugar Pine Point State Park, when you come to our historic zone, everything is Park Brown. Because everybody thought before, in the 1980s, before we had the PEF process, that Park Brown was, we should go ahead and paint that beautiful clear cedar Park Brown. And now we're never going to get rid of it. So the PEF process is a laborious one, but critical to the to meet the mission of the state parks.
Thanks, Heidi. It's a really great process. I know I learned a lot from you in this process too when I was in the Borrego Foundation. So appreciate that. How about Michelle and Anna? What do you guys think? Anything to add and some key points about your process?
Heidi's process is excellent, and we don't go through such a formal process. We do use our planning documents, as Heidi does, to guide our budgetary process. We also put together an annual fund development plan. So the board decides, what are we going to be able to do? How much money are we going to be able to raise in different fundraising aspects? And then that all folds into our budget as well. If State Parks has requests, we have certain line items that are for small things that are just in the budget on a regular basis that they can come to us for. But then we also have restricted funds. For instance, we raised money a few years ago for a small capital campaign for our General Visitor Center. We still have some funds left in there. So they know that they can come to us to do any improvements to the Visitor Center, for instance. And we have a couple other funds like that as well that we can draw on when we get some specific requests. But because of our whole role of supporting the Volunteer in Parks program, and that we fund our own staff to do that, a lot of our funding goes towards supporting all the different program activities. But again, if we had a specific purpose and a specific reason, we may seek grant funding to be able to accomplish something. Last year, we put the first lifeguard tower on Sonoma Coast, and that was through grant funds that we were able to access. So, we do work on it on a regular basis to make sure that when State Parks does come to us for something, we do our best to be able to raise the money if we don't already have it in a restricted account.
Yeah, I have a couple of resources I can add, and I think, like Paige said at the beginning, the process is different for everyone, but I think the goals of being aligned in your plan is the same, no matter the size or whether you have staff or not. One of the things, like Heidi was talking about, capturing ideas, and I'm sure it's, all of you have experience. Ideas are not, we don't have a lack of ideas at State Parks. Usually we get them from all different places. So I, at one point, had to do a, let's see if I can get this up. Can you see it? Mm-hmm. Okay. Had to find a way to collect everything. And this is kind of the archive that we keep. So it basically contributes to our idea bank if we're not planning at the same time. And like Heidi touched on, it's what are the goals, what steps will be taken, who's going to be involved, does it require help from or impact the Volunteers in Parks program, which we don't operate like Michelle does, so we have to really be mindful of the fact that Volunteers in Parks for our organization report to California State Parks. Why it's being proposed now, and this is just a simple one page. How long will it take? Does it have phases? What are the milestones, costs? And then really the most important part of this is the bottom is, has it been discussed with State Parks? Has it been discussed with docent leadership, which for us, is uniquely involved in our operations? And then has it been discussed and approved by the relevant committee of our board? And so any project that comes forward, whether it's a $500,000 project or a $10,000 project, has one of these created. And the other issue that we saw, I'm going to have to switch documents here. The other issue we saw was fairly evaluating, how to fairly evaluate different projects when you're looking at them. And I'm sure people have had this experience on the board where it's like, you know, I want to paint the barn, but I want to add a new scope for the school program, but I want to provide 4 more school trips, but I want to do a new research project. And so it's really hard to get to a consensus or fairly evaluate different things if you're not evaluating them on an agreed upon criteria. And so for us, we really had to get to a place of saying, let's agree on what our criteria are as a board, and then Parks was involved in doing, in creating this. And all of our directors and myself and State Parks get to evaluate each project based on these set criteria. So it supports our mission, supports DPR's mission, supports our plan. We're currently working on a new general plan, and so it supports the priorities in those. And then the other thing is, like, is it going to be easy for us to fundraise for? Is it going to be hard if it requires too much DPR staff time, which we know is so limited? But this has been really useful in, basically you end up with every project having a score, and that score helps to identify which may be the most crucial to go after at the earliest time. And then we include some of this stuff in our budgeting and planning process.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much. I think those were really good examples of how you manage that process too. And I'll just reiterate that theme. This really is about the process of it, especially as you as leaders are bringing a board through this process too. It's bringing a board through the process. It's bringing a CAL through the process. Sometimes it's docents as well. And we all wish we had unlimited money, resources, and time. But you just have to prioritize it. So I think this is very helpful. Thank you. We've covered some of the stuff that we had planned to talk about as well. Specifically, that timing can be so tricky, especially when you're trying to juggle fundraising asks, whether they be for donors or grant requests that are outstanding as well. Do you have any ideas and tips for how you manage that unexpected? And also those unexpected requests that come in too. Like, in other words, as a board, do we have to know exactly what we're going to spend and how it's going to be spent, or do you allow for those contingencies?
I can start that one. I think we do have a budget that we start the year out with, and our goal is to meet that budget. Very rarely do we end up a year, completely in line with what happened. And I think as partners, we all really excel in flexibility, but we build in some room for flexibility in our planning and budgeting by allocating a certain amount of money towards things like facilities or trails every year. But we get new requests from people throughout the whole year and evaluate those as they come in with the help of our board. And I know Heidi and Michelle have both talked about restricted funds. For us, if we're holding any money that can serve a purpose immediately, there's very little evaluation that needs to go into that. If we're agreed with our partners, it goes into that and is reflected as a budget amendment for our board. But very rarely do we end up a year with budget versus actuals completely in line.
The one thing I would like to add that's been useful for our organization is not to micromanage some of the spending with state parks, and allow the supervising ranger, the supervising maintenance person, or the cultural person to just freely spend. So a good example is that our supervising ranger for the Lake Tahoe sector will ask for interpretive support fund and she'll come up with a list of things that she wants. But if a pair of snowshoes all of a sudden pops up as a need, she has complete autonomy from our board to spend up to that limit, utilizing her best discretion for that. And that's really freed up a lot of our time and discussion at board meetings, because we really don't want to micromanage some of the general spending, because we don't want to tell state parks how to do their job for some of these funds. But then when it comes to a project, if we're going to give $50,000 to repair a roof, then there's full expectation of progress reports.
follow up too, Heidi, on what you were just saying. What is the approval process like on the state park side? Do you have a form that you use? If you're, for example, if there's a park aide that comes in and says, hey, I have this request for the interpretive fund, do you grant it, or do you need your CAL signature, or what does that look like?
So since the CAL has already approved a request from the supervising ranger, for an example, that I will direct that person to go to the supervising ranger. She's in charge of where that $2,000, how that $2,000, for example, is going to be spent. And it's up to her discretion. And when she gets to $2,000, that's the end of the spending. So I direct them back to the park staff to manage the money that they've been granted. That's the important word. And then we ask for a grant report at the end of the year. Can you specifically tell us not only what was purchased, but what public benefit was gained from that purchase?
That makes sense. And I'm reminded of our friend Randy Wajera, and he likes to use the analogy that state parks begins with a full bucket, right? And has to empty it throughout the year, whereas nonprofits, we start with the empty bucket and we have that responsibility to fill it. So with your process at Sierra State Parks Foundation, you're actually giving state parks that full bucket too at the beginning of the year. So it's interesting perspective. Yeah. How about you, Michelle? Anything else?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add to that. We do things a little bit differently. We do get requests, but like I said, mostly we're able to fulfill the amount of restricted accounts that we have set aside for certain purposes or with grant funds. And so quite often we will collaborate with state parks on a grant, or I'll go to them and say, I'm looking at applying for this funding for this thing. What do you think? And I get their approval, and then I move forward. And a lot of times it's up to us to implement those projects. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's state parks will come in and do their part as well. It just depends.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Excellent. Well, I know we've talked a little bit, or a lot, I should say, about this in terms of the budget. Obviously, the annual plan is very closely aligned with the budgeting process for the organization. But I'm curious if you used an annual plan or elements from that process as you've gone to the community, say at outreach events, or as you speak with donors, or as Michelle just mentioned too, with grant proposals. Do you find that this is a useful tool you can use when you're communicating those priorities?
Yeah, I can just say that very, very much so. We really take seriously the things that are in our strategic plan, and we will develop strategies for accomplishing those goals. And I think that funders really appreciate the fact that we have created a shared vision with state parks, and that whatever we're doing is agreed upon between us. And so they're going to be a lot more likely to fund something because they know that we have our partners' approval for it. So yeah, I mean, it's really important. And I think in terms of the community as well, we're really, we did a lot of stakeholder surveys to compile our strategic plan, and that really helped to guide us towards what were the things that our stakeholder groups, these could be other environmental organizations in the area, other civic groups in our community. It's our volunteers, it's our major our donors, any of our donors and members, park staff. So we did a lot of asking questions of our community and engage them in the process, so that now as we present our strategic plan to them in the form of the executive summary, like I showed you, they can really get an idea of what we really have on our plate for the next 3 years. And it's, just like a general plan for the park, it's a guiding document that we will refer to and update as time goes on. And then we can report back on these are the things we've accomplished each year.
I'd like to add a little bit about that. It also makes sure that you don't go sideways and don't extend it to mission creep. So when there's always grants that come up or opportunities that come up, and state parks might come to me and say, oh, I saw this opportunity and it's really nice having a plan that you could rely on to make sure you stay within your lane and within your capacity. Because it's so easy to go outside our capacity. That's why I like capturing ideas. Maybe we'll do that in our next strategic plan. Our strategic plan is up for renewal in 2021, and I'm already starting to capture some comments that people are giving me. But having that plan really helps to keep us in that lane and focus and to prevent mission creep.
Really good point, Heidi. Thank you. Especially, I can see it being a useful tool as you're onboarding new board members too. It's comforting, I would imagine, for a board member not to have to feel that they are inventing stuff for the organization to do, which unfortunately sometimes happens, you know. And it's like, oh no, this is what we've decided, and you have a process for bringing on those new ideas too. So I like that a lot. Yeah, Anna, how about you? Anything to add on that?
You touched on the timing of it too, and one of the things that our budget includes, you know, oftentimes we'll agree on a project, but we don't have restricted funds sitting there for that project, and so we will budget for projects that we've agreed on pending receipt of funding for those. So we'll say, yes, we've agreed on this. We know it's a shared priority. It's going to cost $60,000. We hope to receive that in the first 6 months of this year, and then we can spend it once we do. So we also use that budget as a tool. And when we have that, we basically have created our wish list for fundraising for the year. So we have XYZ that Parks has agreed to and knows we're doing, and we can share with donors and kind of start immediately.
Thank you, Al. That covers everything that we had at this point thought about bringing up to you all, you webinar attendees, unless there's anything the panelists want to add that we didn't cover already. But barring that, we want to open up that chat for all of you to ask questions of our panelists. So feel free to shoot us with some questions here.
While we're waiting for questions, Paige, I think I'd like to share a little bit from my perspective how that annual plan ties into special events. Because because what that does, as we know, we put on special events for multiple objectives. For us, we divide it into interpretive events or fundraising events. And by having that plan, so we know what our specific tactics for raising money, that really helps with state parks understanding why we're doing fundraising on state park property and why it's important that we bring people onto state park property. So it's a shared fundraising effort. And so that's another good use for that plan.
I agree. Excellent. Thank you. That's a good point too. I will say from state parks perspective, I think it's helpful having that information up front at the top of the year. Hopefully you are working with your CAL to do any special event permits all in one, if you happen to know what those events are going to look like for the entire year. I know that's something that would be useful on our end, state parks end, that is. But I also agree with you that it's an important communication piece there too, to show where it goes. Thanks. And Michelle, did I see you want to add something too?
Well, I was just noticing some of the chat, and Carolyn from CALPA was asking about getting these documents up on the CALPA online community. So CALPA is great. For those of you who are not part of CALPA, there are lots of benefits for being a member of CALPA now that they have joined with PLA. And we have a whole online community, and we're going to be uploading documents, and we can include a lot of these forms and some of these examples up on the CALPA online community for you to access. So thank you, Carolyn, for bringing that up.
And I'd like to address Henry, because Henry seems frustrated that we're not showing you how to put together an annual plan. And it's my understanding, and Paige, please correct me, that State Parks is giving us the opportunity to put together annual plans however fits and is customized for our unique organization. So what we're doing today is giving you some ideas of how 3 organizations put together plans for you to go ahead and create your own strategy.
Yes, I agree with that one too. We very intentionally chose not to have a specific form that needs to be filled out, for example, because I feel strongly that this is a customized process, something that's very specific to each partnership and the organizational culture around that partnership and partnership culture, I guess you could say. So what I've seen so far, there is a sample form that is on our partnerships website in the Cooperating Association Policies and Guidelines section. I can pull that up as actually, why don't I share my screen? Oops, no, no, let's pull this up. Bear with me one moment. So this is the partnership section of the State Parks website, and you can find that in About Us and Park Management, and I believe we're in partnerships there. You go scroll to the Cooperating Association section, Policies and Guidelines. Here's a sample annual plan that you can download if it's useful to you. I'll warn you, this is based off of the National Park Service annual plan, so it's very legalese and parkese. It has been vetted through our legal department as well, but I think it's important to note that these plans are not legal documents. They are just documented written communication of what you're planning to do together as partners. There's no legal binding associated with them, so something to note. Another thing that I have seen so far, folks have uploaded just simply on letterhead a narrative that says our board of directors met on such and such date with our CAL, and we agreed upon the following priorities for the year, and we commit $20,000 towards the seasonal interpretive aid position, or whatever the case may be, or we're going to continue our fundraising for the capital improvement project, and it's that simple one-pager. And if that's what works for the partnership, that's certainly appropriate as well.
Lindsay had a question on here about do we list deliverables and goals for state park funding, and how do we evaluate with DPR? And we don't do that in our planning. However, if we're entering into an agreement to do a $500,000 project with state parks, we will develop a separate written agreement around who's responsible for what, and that so that we can make sure that if there is a change of staff, if there is a change of DPR staff or board president or association staff, that everything has been agreed to in advance, particularly for multiple year projects. And it's not completely, it's not uber detailed, but it's saying, the organization will provide this, and that's usually funding, potentially some support of some kind. DPR will provide this. And so just kind of a clear outline of what we've agreed to do for a large project, but wouldn't do that for something smaller.
However, I think it's fully appropriate for all the organizations to ask for end-of-year grant reporting from our state park partners. This really is grants that we are giving to parks, and so whether it be a written summary, how did you spend that $1,000 for interpretive support, I think that's a fair ask of parks, and something that we're talking about here at the Sierra District to be required as part of that process to more formalize that mindset of grants.
I agree. And for those that have perhaps asked and been frustrated, our districts, as you may have heard, are unable to provide those financial reports at the moment. This is something that is all of California statewide. It affects all of us. Unfortunately, it's due to the conversion to the fiscal accounting management software. So the reports are in process. We don't have an ETA on when this might actually be available, so I apologize. But yes, Heidi is 100% right. It's actually the law as well that state parks provide those financial reports at least on a quarterly basis. So we are working to remedy it, and hopefully it'll be up and running soon. I'll mention that Daniel asked, he said that the sample plan is a PDF, and that is correct. It's a PDF version. I can see that the Word version is uploaded as well, so you could just plug things in there. Great. And Henry, we're glad you're not frustrated, so thank you. Henry, if I can share a little bit of your story. I know Henry's in a very remote park where there was very little state park presence there too, and I know that can be really frustrating, because I think where some of the process breaks down for their organization might be in just getting the information out to the CAL, not because the CAL is incompetent or unwilling to participate, but just for sheer lack of time and resources. So we understand how frustrating that can be. And hopefully with email communications, some of that can help as well. And I don't know if any of the panelists have had any experience with that too. Just what are some ways that you can make that time with your CAL as efficient as possible? Heidi?
Well, I'm going to talk about one time when I was a Cub Scout leader. And we were overseas in Germany, so we had different languages, and we had military dads, and we had the hippie mom scout leader over here, and everybody had ideas of what should be done. And we didn't have the big organization that I have with the Sierra State Parks Foundation, but we had kind of the same problem of, we're raising money, there's a lot of requests for disbursement, how do we make those decisions? And just having a discussion and a priority of where that money and how that money is going to be spent, and how that money that the projects that you want to vision for, how you're going to raise, if nothing else, just having that discussion and putting it on that one sheeter will really help you move forward. And what that does, it helps all of us, whether you're a huge organization or that Cub Scout troop, not spin your wheels year after year, but it gives you a way to move forward.
Great advice, Heidi. Thank you. Daniel just asked, and I agree, we missed this earlier, but I will reiterate what Carolyn said. I would also love to be able to have sample plans to share, especially as we're rolling this out. This is something that's going to evolve, hopefully grow, and become a very useful tool for all of the partnerships. So if there's stuff that folks are willing to share, some of their planning documents themselves, or some of the approval sheets, like the project approval sheets, or like Anna's rating system that she has too, we'd be happy to share those tools with you. And we would love to gather others that we can share amongst each other as well. I don't know if others, I know there's a way to do this on CALPA, on the CALPA website. So I might let Anna, can you handle that one?
Well, I don't know about how to do it on the CALPA website, but I just wanted to point out, even though we've been planning with our partners in past years, this is the first time that DPR has required it of us. So it is also the first time that we're documenting it for DPR. Like, we wouldn't share our entire operating plan, which is too extensive, but I'd be happy to put together, where we are this year and just share it. So, a 2 or 3 pager of what we've done. But I don't have anything to pull from in past years because it was not a requirement of DPR. So we have our internal stuff, but never created this.
Makes sense. Yeah. Excellent. I think we've hit most of the questions here so far. If I missed anyone, please let me know. And I think part of what I think it was Lindsay was mentioning too, that maybe a list of what would be included, maybe that was Carolyn, sorry about that, but what was included, what could be included in an annual plan would be helpful. So I can certainly pull that together and talk through, provide some different areas that you might want to include on just a narrative annual plan if it's not necessarily a budget. That'd be helpful. Great. Perfect. Well, great. If there's no other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up early. I know, let's see, Heidi, do you want to explain a little bit about what CALPA is and how folks can benefit from CALPA?
I'd be happy to, thank you. So CALPA is the California League of Park Associations. It's a network of the nonprofit partners that work together in California state parks. We're the Sierra State Parks Foundation is a member of the organization because I get great networking opportunities with my fellow board members as well as staff and volunteers. But what's really exciting about CALPA right now is that we have partnered with Public Lands Alliance, which is a nationwide organization of public land partners throughout the nation. And what that gives me now is an opportunity to have learning portals to ask questions. So I can actually go to the CALPA question answer place and ask my national park partners around the country, Mom and Pop or Yosemite, can you show me an example of your annual planning plan? Or this morning I had a question about how to write a, we had a first time we had somebody with a donation and I wasn't really sure how I count the credit card charge in this particular case, and I got an answer. So CALPA is a wonderful resource. We work with state parks in putting on an annual training program. This year it's going to be at Asilomar on when? October
15th through 17th.
Excellent. So everybody put October 15th through 17th on your calendar so we can all meet at Asilomar and learn from each other, because I have found that very valuable in my role.
Excellent. Thank you, Heidi. And I'm glad you mentioned that resource of sharing information too, especially from a national perspective, because National Park Service has just also required this of their cooperating associations as well, written annual plans, that is. I have, and just attended at the PLA convention just a few weeks ago, I attended their session on the annual planning process. And I have a sample from Eastern National that I would be happy to ask them if they could allow me to share as well. So you could see what National Park Service is doing and what some of the co-ops are doing there. But you could also pop onto some of the threads, because I'm sure they're sharing information with each other as well, and that might give you some ideas as to what to expect. Excellent. Well, once again, we thank you so much for coming today, and this is our inaugural webinar with CALPA. So thanks. We made it through okay. Hopefully you all learned a little bit of something and something new and different. I'd love to see this continue as well, and I'm sure as we work together, we'll be brainstorming some ways that we can connect through technology and really learn from each other. So thanks again. Excellent. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. So thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you, Heidi, and Anna and Paige.
Bye, everybody.